this is the first job where we are starting to use wiggle wire, and we use wiggle wire to attach all the covers on the hoop house. What we're putting on here we refer to as a baffle. It's just one panel that's going to block off this first opening where our roll-up side's going to be, to where wind isn't getting in at the end of the roll-up side. Brings us to talk about tools. We're going to give you a little tool pack that's going to allow you to do everything you need to finish up the hoop house. We got a pair of scissors, we got drills that match up with all the sizes we commonly drill, and some drivers that fit the hardware that you've got. And last but not least, this wiggle wire cutter. So that pack is going to help you a lot to finish. Here's the wiggle wire cutter. It's a really nice wire cutter that's really set up to cut through a hardened wire like this. Pretty dull surface, but it just pinches them off. And I'm going to cut what I call W's, these parts that are shaped basically like a W, just a little short piece that's going to fill in where we don't need a full wire. And then to make this remainder wire just the right length, I'm going to cut a long W, one that's just a little bit longer than a W would be. And with those short pieces, we can tack it up at the top. Just want one in here that's going to hold it up to where there's some overlap with the poly or the curtain that's going to go in here next. I just tack it in there. It doesn't have to be like a finished amount. And then I'm going to pull it to where there's the most slack is at this end. I'm going to use my full wire. Start wiring in here. And you just go back and forth when you're wiggle wiring. Just use your thumb and your finger to push it back and forth. Over here I just need these little shorties just to hold it in place, because we're going to have a full wire that comes when we cover the end wall. It's going to wrap over here, and that's where we'll use a full wire. So this just needs to have some short ones. And I'm trying to avoid going over the screw heads. That would just be a way that the wire sits up and gets in the way of the next wire coming in. So wrapping around a screw head, putting this in. And all this extra length that we have down at the ground, you're just going to bury that alongside so that it isn't flapping up and getting caught in the roll-up side. Last, I just work my way down on this full wire, just working back and forth. I want to make sure I get every one of those in. If I don't have one in all the way, it can pop back out. So every one of those corners, every one of those joints, getting behind the channel. And this channel is something that we have in that set of channel. They're 5 feet long. We've just put one on each of these two positions to pick up this panel. We do this on 4 corners, and we're ready to put on a roll-up side. So now that we have the baffles in, we're just going to run this side curtain. And this is what's going to roll up to vent the house. We're using the wiggle wire again to go back and forth, making sure that every knuckle is in place. And I'm lining it up just to keep a steady reference. I'm using the top of this second to top channel. So I can just lay it right on top there, kind of hold it with my hand and run the wire back and forth. I'm kind of trying to pull it a little snug down the house as I go. It's nice to be able to wire with one hand. Sometimes people are trying to work 2 hands here with the wire. You need to get to where you can do that with one hand so your other hand's free to be positioning your material. If I had this curtain any higher than this material could be up in here and interfere with the locks going in when we do the top poly. That's why we're keeping it down at this height. It's a convenient height. And then we've laid our wires out on the ground to where when I get to the next position, I'm just looking for another wire. There's no reason to cross these wires. We're just going to start where the other one ended and then work our way down. These blue stripes I'm noticing are really convenient too, because I can kind of watch that and see where it's lining up, and it just ends up lining up with this other channel. And then at this point you can see these little temporary wires, the W's again, that we've put in to hold it in place. This way one person can do this job. We used to have a second person holding it up at each position, but we figured out that we can free that person up just by putting in a couple little temporaries to hold it in place. And one person can run all the way down to the end. It's kind of fussy, but it's worth getting this lined up really nice because it makes the roll-up curtain roll up really straight. It looks pretty. Nothing like having a little pride in your hoop house and looking good with the frame and how it rolls up. So one of the things you learn when you're wiggle wiring is to really get that last little knuckle in. You're either going to use your finger or your thumb to really push that in there. And then at the end, we just cut it. We don't want to ever have any wire sticking out beyond. So it's really better if I even come back to here. Anytime we're going to cut wire, we're going to pick to cut it on one of the flat places. That's why it's not cut in some place where there's going to be a real sharp point that we need to push on with our thumb or finger. So I'm going to come all the way back to here, cut it on a flat. I can tuck that in. It doesn't matter at all that it's come up that short. And I'm going to take, this is a place where it could be kind of vulnerable to have the wind blowing it and whatnot. So we're going to take and put one of these W's or these short pieces in to just double over at that end. And then we always cut the curtain. Because we have that baffle behind it, it doesn't have to stick out over the end. And it can even get wired closed in the winter back at this other second bow. So we can cut it short to where it's going to not get bunched up in any kind of way when it rolls up and down. And that just makes a really nice side curtain. Call us anytime you need some help, and we'd be glad to talk you through any of these steps.